Welcome to the 19th season of the Nitwits, a weekly roundtable discussion on the Nittany Lions and the only show of its kind in the state. Our Nitwits panel features Neil Riddell of the Altoona Mirror and Mark Brennan of FightOnState.com. Between them, they've covered Penn State for 70 years. The Nitwits are hosted by WTAJ Sports Director Alex Colley, and each week we welcome a former Nittany Lion as our special guest analyst. The Nitwits are brought to you by Irwin Financial, Raymond James, an independent firm and a firm foundation for your financial future. By Coldwell Banker, no one will work harder to sell your home. By Courtesy Motor Sales of Altoona, where courtesy means a great deal. By Fiore True Value on 6th Avenue, Altoona, just ask rental, buy what you want, rent what you need. By The Allegro, where fine cuisine is a way of life. By Health South, your rehab choice. Health South Altoona, ask for us by name. By Monarch Cleaners, for all your dry cleaning, uniform, and mat rentals. By Reed and Solani Orthodontics, Dr. Reed and Solani provide orthodontics for children and adults. By W.S. Lee & Sons, your local food distributor specializing in distributing a full line of food service products to restaurants, schools, and institutions throughout central Pennsylvania. By EasyToUse.com, your Yellow Pages connection in print and online. By FightOnState.com, as close as you get to Penn State football without putting on a helmet. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Sunday.
Welcome to the Nitwits. It's a new week with a new game to talk about with Neil Riddell, the Altoona Mirror. We've got FightOnState.com's Mark Brennan, and joining us for the very first time, former Penn State defensive tackle Brandon Noble joining us. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'll be your host, Alex Colley, and gentlemen, let's jump right into it. Penn State with a 29-26 overtime win over Minnesota, and now that we've had a day to let this game kind of stew, what's our first impressions here?
Well, I think that this is a game they really needed. Really breathes some new life into the season after a lopsided loss at Michigan, and I think changes the course. People were starting to really kind of get questioning a little bit of the direction, and I think that they really showed a tremendous amount of heart. Maybe didn't play a great game on offense, but when it mattered, they made some huge plays.
Yeah, when it came to grading this game, I gave Penn State a B+, and it's one of those deals to me where I think the total was more than the sum parts, if that makes sense. I think this was a very important win, as you said, Neil, especially given the way they played in the first half. When they came out in the second half, go 3 and out, I figured, I was joking. I thought the game was over. I didn't think there was any way. And for them to show the heart, the determination, and the coaching staff to make the necessary adjustments and stick with some things, I thought was important.
Yeah, it definitely was a turning point, right? Not the first half. The first half was kind of what we've seen. And I think that when you look at where they're going, again, it's a young team. It's a relatively, new offense, and the things that they're working on right now, it showed up in the second half, right? And they stuck with it, like Mark said. But there's still a ways to go.
McSorley is showing some real leadership and spunk. Maybe not a decorated pro prospect at this point, but that might not matter. I mean, this kid is making plays with his feet, and confusing the defense, keeping his eyes downfield. And he's doing things because he's starting the threat to scramble that we haven't seen in a while.
Yeah, and Brandon, you've played college, you've played in the NFL. Half the battle is guys making plays in the clutch. You could be the 5-star whatever. This guy got it done in the clutch, and that to me was a huge stepping stone for him because we saw some of that, but he was never quite able to get them over the hump in the big games. And in this game, he did it.
Yeah, and he did it with his feet a lot. I think the way that he moves in the pocket gives them something that, again, and I'm not beating Hack up, but gives them something that Hackenberg didn't have, right? It gives him the ability to move around with a young, new offensive line. He can make plays with his feet. And he tossed some really good footballs yesterday. A couple of them you go, I don't know how that was completed, but he put them right where they were supposed to be. And the other thing is he's not giving the ball away, which a young quarterback will do. And that's really big right now. And if he can continue to do that, I think the offense can only go up.
They didn't fumble the ball yesterday at all, which had been a problem. Chris Godwin, I mean, talk about laying it out over the middle. I mean, if he doesn't come up with that ball on third down, they may not be able to kick the field goal. Their special teams, very impressive yesterday. There were a lot of positives.
Well, their receivers had something to prove. They didn't play well at all against Michigan. Michigan hit them with so much man coverage. And, listen, these are supposed to be the marquee players on the team, the strong position. They didn't get it done. For them to bounce back, I mean, you had, 53-yard catch, 53-yard catch, 36-yard catch. That was able, when people look at Barkley and say he was bottled up, well, yeah, there was a reason he was bottled up, because Penn State was, exploiting that in getting those long gains. So I thought the fact that the receiver stepped up was huge for them too.
So we saw McSorley really extend some plays, allow some plays to develop and see receivers get some separation. But what were some of the other standout players you saw? Obviously, we saw Charles get his first big catch, and Marcus Allen on defense.
Yeah, I think Marcus Allen is the one that obviously when you watch that and you go, man, 20 some odd tackles. I mean, that's a busy day. There, again, pluses and minuses. That's a safety making a whole lot of tackles. But when you look at kind of where the defense is with not a lot of linebackers left, a young interior D-line, the two tackles are relatively new with that rotation. He's going to have to make tackles, and the great thing is he is making them. And I think the back end, I think the secondary for Penn State's playing well right now. And again, it's kind of like you said with the receivers, right? That's the strength of the defense right now with what's happened to the linebacking core, and they stood up yesterday and played good ball.
They really needed Allen to be closer to the football. He's so good at run support.
Like a linebacker, yeah.
Yeah, and they, and with Golden out, another blow to defense. What I liked is the rotation. They had 10 defensive linemen. Now, they don't have you, Brandon. It takes 10 guys to replace you, but they had 10 defensive linemen make at least one tackle. I mean, that's a lot of substitution and kind of all hands on deck.
And one guy we have to give a shout out to is Tyler Davis. I mean, you don't even think about it. And it was interesting that Franklin says he doesn't even talk to him when he goes out and kicks. And, if you're a Penn State fan, I'm knocking on wood there. You can't see me, fortunately. But, yeah, I mean, those aren't like 55-yard kicks, but those are pressure kicks, money kicks, and this guy's made 17 in a row now.
The offensive line also did not allow a sack. There were several that were close, and I think that's an example of McSorley's poise in the pocket, because there were a couple that looked like, and he's had some issues with not only a sack but losing the ball.
Yeah, and he stepped into some throws where he knew he was going to get hit. Again, it's just that maturation process that a young quarterback has to go through, and he's doing that. And again, it's not easy and they're getting better. The O-line is getting better, but that group is much maligned, and there's a reason. But again, he's stepping up, he's moving around, he's taking shots, and they are getting better. They're going to get better.
They stuck with the run. They finally blew it open in overtime, too. I mean, they had not created a lot of running room, but they stuck with that and got the ball quicker to Barkley.
And how much of that goes back to Brandon's point, where when McSorley is able to make things happen with his feet, I don't think it's a coincidence that he makes several big plays, scores a touchdown, has that 26-yard gain, and then in overtime, Barkley finally finds a crack. And we got to give a shout-out to that guy, too, because for him to be as patient as he is, no complaints, just, running into a wall, and when he gets the opportunity to win the game, he does it.
All right, well, we'll take the good with the not so good as we turn our attention to areas of concern following their win. We'll be right back after this.
The Nitwits are brought to you by Irwin Financial, Raymond James, an independent firm and a firm foundation for your financial future. By Coldwell Banker, no one will work harder to sell your home. By Courtesy Motor Sales of Altoona, where courtesy means a great deal. By Fiore True Value on 6th Avenue, Altoona, just ask rental, buy what you want, rent what you need.
I'm Brad Spider Caldwell, and you're watching The Nitwits.
Doesn't get any better than that.
How do we follow that up? Well, we've talked the good, a little bit of bad, and now the worries. Yesterday we saw a slow start, some injuries, two common themes for the Nittany Lions this year. But what were your concerns after recapping the win?
You have to start with the resident Mr. Wet Blanket, Neil, who after this stirring win drills James Franklin with he just absolutely laid into him.
I was worried that Chris Peterson was going to end it before I had a chance to get into that. I think it had to be raised. I'm not apologizing for that, but there's some game management things that are still, let's say, a work in progress. The timeout at the end of the half, which he really didn't address, he had a chance to address that, and maybe there's no explanation for it. It gave Minnesota time, and that 3 points was a big deal. But also, and Mark, I thought you made a great point in the press box about, their short yardage offense. This is why he didn't go for it on 4th and 1. He explained it. They hadn't been great in short yardage. But when he got down, McSorley got him down to the inch line. They still kicked the field goal and decided to let the air out of the stadium. They need a short yardage offense. That's a concern.
I wish there was, and I've never coached, Brandon, you could probably address this better than any of us, but it almost seems when you line up in the shotgun, I wonder why they just don't get up under center on some of those plays. And I get why you do it in most of the other areas of the field, but when you're down there and you really want to send a message, and I guess part of the argument would be, your O-line is struggling a little bit, but how are those guys ever going to get confidence if you don't just get up under center and hand it off? I mean,
it's a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. We've struggled in the short yardage areas, right? And we don't have that big bruising O-line to move people forward. We do have one of the best backs in the nation and a mobile quarterback, though. Getting under center is kind of a lost art these days. So
yeah.
I think there's some issues there, again, with how solid are we on the interior 3 of the O-line. But deciding to kick a field goal at that point, it does take the air out a little bit, but it's better than getting stopped at 4th and inches. So I think that you want to, as a coach, you want to take points, and I understand that. From a fan's perspective, as a letterman, I want to see him punch that in and get the touchdown. But I do understand kind of what the issue is there, and it's growing. I agree with you, Mark. They need to get those guys moving and let them get some confidence that we can move people off the ball.
And they had just been blown up at the other end of the field, but that was 4th and 2.
They also went for on a 4th and 4.
Sneaks. I think this was interesting.
Right.
Under O'Brien, they were so good with the quarterback sneaks. Now, maybe they had a superior line and they could just nudge that nose in there, but that has to be a part of your offense
every single time. And listen, when you talk about O'Brien, he was coming from the pro ranks, and the quarterbacks are always under center there. But it's something where if you want to be the team that this team wants to be, I don't care who the offensive line is, sooner or later you're going to have to be able to pick up 1 yard. And I think, to me, I just think it would have been a great message to send. And clearly all the fans, most of the fans who were booing agreed with me.
The first time I think I've ever seen the field goal was good and it was still all boos as everybody was running off the field. So obviously we do want to see a little more aggression as far as building up the confidence, but as far as the areas that we've talked about in the past under James Franklin, you mentioned it, the timeouts. Have you seen improvement, obviously, but it continues to be an area where it's in flux?
Well, I mean, I just think that also their transition to Joe Moorhead is still going on. They're really only averaging they're averaging just over 6 rushing first downs a game, and that's just not enough. It's amazing they won yesterday. Minnesota had 31 first downs.
Yeah,
how many times has Penn State ever won a game where they allowed 31 first downs? So I think that's an area. And to me, special teams, I think they're asking just a little bit too much of Barkley when they put him back there. No other back carried at all yesterday, and I think they need to bust something because the margin for error is just too
Yeah,
thin.
and I think the slow start, right, the third downs to me are a huge issue. I think we were like going into halftime only 0 for 8, 0 for 7, something. I mean, that's and that's 2 things. That's number 1, not getting into that third and manageable distance, right? A lot of third and longs, it's tough, right? It's tough to convert. But I think that's something that I've really been watching is, can we get into that 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, get the first down, keep the drive moving, and that hasn't happened, right? I mean, it was 31 first downs to 19 first downs yesterday. You're right. You don't win football games a lot when that happens. So it is good that we got out of there with a win, but at the same time, those are areas that I know that I coached against Joe Moorhead when I was at Temple and he was at Fordham, and he beat us. He's a good football coach. He runs a good offense. But there's a learning process. There's a curve here that comes along with it. And again, there's that O-line, right, that just keeps coming back to. And when is that group going to take a game over?
It's going to be interesting to see, because after the game, James Franklin said there are things he has done in the past, and I'm assuming at Vanderbilt, to combat these slow starts. And I don't know if that means scripting the plays. I'm not sure what that means, and he didn't want to get into it immediately after the game. As we tape this Sunday, that would have been last night. But he said he's going to talk about it this week. So I'm interested to see. I mean, what do you have any idea? What sorts of things do you come up with to combat slow starts? Scripting? I don't know.
Scripting, sometimes the way you handle practice, coming out and not necessarily warming up, just going, right?
Okay.
Just getting out and getting on the field and starting practice, doing something competitive from the moment you walk on the field. A lot of it, though, the players have to take ownership of this, right? This is a player issue to me. It's not a coaching issue. It's, hey, we know who we are. We started slow. We have to figure out as a group how to come out of the tunnel in the first half and play fast and play hard and play disciplined. This one, to me, goes to players. I know that it's Coach Franklin's job and it's a staff's job, and they're the ones that take the brunt of it. But at the end of the day, those kids have to look at themselves and say, there's a reason, and we've got to figure it out as a group.
This is nitpicking a little bit, but we are nitwits.
You're Mr. Web.
I think they got to get the receivers to the first down marker also.
Yeah.
There were a couple real bang
Gesicki.
plays. Gesicki's doing a nice job catching the ball. That's the next step, making sure he gets the first down.
All right, well, we're going to take a timeout here, but when we return, we're going to catch up with Brandon Noble, where he's been, what he's been doing, and what he thinks about Penn State and where they're going. We'll be right back.
The Nitwits are brought to you by the Allegro, where fine cuisine is a way of life. By Health South, your rehab choice. Health South Altoona, ask for us by name. By Monarch Cleaners, for all your dry cleaning, uniform, and mat rentals. By Reed and Selaney Orthodontics, Dr. Reed and Selaney provide orthodontics for children and adults.
We now return to the Nitwits. A roundtable discussion of Penn State football.
Welcome back. As we mentioned earlier, it's Brandon Noble's first visit to the Nitwits, and you're no stranger to returning to Happy Valley, and I imagine that brings back some stellar memories for you, knowing some of the teams you were a part of.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's home to me. I joke, I grew up in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and Coach Paterno recruited me out of there. And he'd get 2 or 3 guys a year, or, kind of over a course of a class. And my parents dropped me off up here in 1992, and I didn't go home till 1997. It was just kind of, this is home to me. And so I've always enjoyed coming back. When I was playing in the NFL, I actually bought a house downtown State College, and I would come up and work out with John Thomas and the strength and conditioning guys during the off season. So Happy Valley is definitely one of my favorite places. Great memories. And I always enjoy the opportunity to get back into town.
And who knew he had all this hair? We're looking, back in the day, he was one of the first guys. I mean, the thing about Brandon is much like Sean Lee. I hate the Dallas Cowboys, but some of my favorite players ended up playing there, and I was so conflicted. Tell us a little bit about your pro career and what you've done since then.
So yeah, I was fortunate. I spent 9 years in the NFL. It was a rough start. I was an undrafted free agent. I was a small, undersized defensive tackle. I was at Penn State at a time when Joe wouldn't let us get big. So if I broke like 270 after Thanksgiving, I was going to hear about it. I was getting called into the office, and they were going to tell me not to eat so much. And that's going to play Michigan State where everybody's 350 pounds. I was like, come on, an extra turkey leg isn't going to hurt. But so I went into the NFL. I had to put some weight on. I played 2 years in NFL Europe, which is no longer around. And then I spent 4 years in Dallas and 3 years in Washington, and now I live in Philadelphia, where they love the Cowboys and the Redskins. So football's been great to me. I coached college ball for 8 years after that, and my kids have gotten a little older, and I wanted to be a little bit more involved in their lives. And unfortunately, some college programs that's tough to do, and I found myself in a situation where I was sleeping at the office 4 nights a week, and I wanted to see my wife and kids. So since then, it's been an interesting transition. It's been 3 years of trying this and trying that, and I was a financial advisor for a little while and didn't like that. And now I work for a company that sells football equipment, and it's a little bit more in my wheelhouse. So it's been almost 20 years or over 20 years. So it's been a long time.
A lot of the former players, particularly from the Joe era, now we've been through, the Bill O'Brien, a short tenure, and now James Franklin in his 3rd year. How have you guys viewed the program, the progress Franklin has made, the challenges, and how have you guys tried to embrace that?
Well, it's it was something that you knew eventually obviously was going to happen, right? And that Coach Paterno was not going to be there, and the next guy was going to be just in trouble, right? And Coach O'Brien was the right guy for that time, and he handled that well. Being an ex-NFL guy myself, I understood when he went back. Like, I got it. There's something to be at that highest level, and if you're an NFL guy, it makes sense. Coach Franklin, I've enjoyed. I actually went in and made it a point to meet him, and I actually went into the building. The first time I met James, I went in the building, wandered around for a while, and he wasn't around. I left, and one of the younger coaches on staff actually called me on my cell and said, "Hey, Coach Franklin's here. He really wants to meet you. Can you come back?" Right? So I went in and I spent about an hour and a half with him in his office, just talking about me, about life, about my experience here, and I walked out of there with a really good feeling about where we are as a program and the kind of the hands that are holding it right now. And I do believe that staff is doing the best that they can with the situation that they walked into. So I'm looking forward to it. I hate the hot seat stuff. I think we got to give the man some more time because I do understand, what we're coming out of.
Well, thanks again for joining us today, and we're going to be happy to have you back again.
Cool. Anytime, man.
All right. Well, we're going to turn our attention to Maryland, who's up next for PSU. The Nitwits will be right back.
The Nitwits are brought to you by W.S. Lee & Sons, your local food distributor specializing in distributing a full line of food service products to restaurants, schools, and institutions throughout central Pennsylvania. By EasyToUse.com, your Yellow Pages connection in print and online. By FightOnState.com, as close as you get to Penn State football without putting on a helmet. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Sunday.
Prediction time as Penn State shifts their focus to 4-0 Maryland coming to Happy Valley, and their marquee wins include Central Florida and Purdue. How do we see this one shaking out?
Well, we should go to Brandon because Wally nailed the score last week. Wally was the Nitwit of the week, so no pressure.
Yeah, well, Wally sets the bar really high. I've known Wally for a long time, so don't ever hold me up to those standards. I really think that this is, coming out of this week with Minnesota, you look at kind of where Maryland is, they can score points. I think it's going to be back and forth. I think there's going to be a lot of points scored. I'm going to go 38-35 Penn State.
Okay, I guess my turn,
Yep.
right? My turn?
Go ahead.
I bow to you. Hey, they better watch it here because they had a big emotional win, and this is a huge game because they could take real momentum into the bye week. I'm going to say Penn State 33, Maryland 27.
I'll go Penn State 32, Maryland 30. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. Maryland runs the ball really well, but I do think Penn State's going to be playing. Yeah, the thing I liked, we started to see some of the swagger back to Penn State in that Minnesota game, and I think they're going to carry that over. Maryland has not beaten a good opponent yet, so let's see what happens when they show up in Happy Valley.
I think Penn State actually gets a good start in this one. I'm going to go Penn State 35, Maryland 24.
Going high.
Nice.
Going high on this one,
Nice.
so we'll see if I'm right. And again, as you mentioned, Wally, the seat got the win last week, so no pressure there, Brandon.
Right,
But,
exactly.
We'll find out. Just
on the
of
board.
course, yeah, and that's right. And of course, Neil still in the lead here, and we'll
Guy
find
misses
out.
a week and he's still in the league.
Hey, Brandon, thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
Good job.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you very
Thanks for
much.
having me.
And we'll see you back here next week with a new game to talk about.
The Nitwits have been brought to you by Irwin Financial, Raymond James, an independent firm and a firm foundation for your financial future. By Coldwell Banker, no one will work harder to sell your home. By Courtesy Motor Sales of Altoona, where courtesy means a great deal. By Fiore True Value on 6th Avenue, Altoona, just ask rental, buy what you want, rent what you need. By The Allegro, where fine cuisine is a way of life. By Health South, your rehab choice. Health South Altoona, ask for us by name. By Monarch Cleaners, for all your dry cleaning, uniform, and mat rentals. By Reed and Solani Orthodontics, Dr. Reed and Solani provide orthodontics for children and adults. By W.S. Lee & Sons, your local food distributor specializing in distributing a full line of food service products to restaurants, schools, and institutions throughout central Pennsylvania. By easytouse.com, your Yellow Pages connection in print and online. By FightOnState.com, as close as you get to Penn State football without putting on a helmet. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Sunday. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.